Hey, this is Marvin and I shortly wanted to present you my fluid simulation app. The first thing you may want to do is click on the menu button, which will appear when you don't touch the screen for 1 or 2 seconds. The menu button is the circle on the top left side. When you click on it, the menu opens and you can see that on the top we have 3 different tabs. The effects tab, where you can influence the look of the fluids, the settings, where you have different options for adjusting the behavior of the fluids, some more general settings for color, for text, for autopilot, randomize options, a background, and general settings like the language, recording options, and others, which I will come back to later. And you have the sounds tab where you can configure a background track which is playing, or you can even utilize my Fluid app to work as a little visualizer for your own loaded songs. First, I want to talk about the effects tab, where we have the most important feature, and that's awesome to get you started. We have dozens of different presets you can choose from. You can just go through this list, and whenever you see something you like, you just click on it. And here we go, you have beautiful visuals. When you don't like the quality too much, because I see that right now, it's a little bit pixelated, you go into the settings tab and increase the resolution a little bit. So that looks way better right now for me. It depends a little bit on the power of your device, but in general, you can do ultra resolution, even though it drains the battery a little bit more. So we have all these presets prepared for you. That's perfect. And you can even change all the parameters in the simulation. Let's say this preset looks a little bit too bloomy for me, so I disable the bloom. And when I don't want to see the particles, then I disable the particles. And whenever I want to save a configuration, I can save it as my own preset. So you click on Save As on the Enter text. You say, giving it whatever name you want. Click on the check mark next to it and you see here we have our preset. You can load them when you just navigate through this custom preset list. So now we have loaded the test preset. When we go back to something, we have loaded our something preset and so forth and so on. Now we are going to talk about all the different effects we have, which we can apply to the fluids. One which I really like is the bloom effect. You can directly see what it does. It's creating a bloomy background. The threshold just says how long the effect will be visible. A high threshold means that it's only visible at the top of the fluids when you just touch the screen and the fluids appear. The lower it goes, the more general the bloom becomes, and it's showing at the whole fluids. The intensity is obvious for sure. How higher it goes, the more intense it is. It looks a little bit too much right now because we also have enabled the sun rays, so you may want to disable it. Now it looks way better. But just going back to a little bit more normal values, I would say we have a little bit of bloom here. And now back to the sun rays. Sun rays are a little neat effect, which you see at the edges of the fluids. You can experiment with the gamma and the inverted one. It's just changing a little bit of the look. The density says how long the rays are, and the weight defines how much it should become into the whole final image. We disable it for now and we come to the pixelation, which is something I really like. You can just make pixels out of the fluids. You have different types to adjust, so this one is really basic. I really like the field. That looks awesome sometimes. You have shapes. You can adjust over here. Shape size, shape value. It's toggling between a circle and a square, and you can also define a border. And some other things to explore. You also can change the size for sure. Higher value means you have more pixels, and lower value means you have less pixels. Disabling that for now. Coming to the particles, which is my favorite one. I really like the particles. The mix can influence how much the fluids should be visible on top of the particles. So as we concentrate on the particles, I will configure mix to 0, which means we only see the particles at the moment. Speed is something very obvious, I think. It's just influencing the speed of the particles. Color type is dynamic or a static one. The static one, you can just choose a color and it stays the same the whole time. It's not depending on the fluids anymore. That's just a static color. When you go for dynamic, it's adjusting along with the fluid color. You have a color shift, which is shifting the color a little bit. The density, how much particles we wanted to see, low density, less particles, high density, many particles. We have the size, which is also something pretty clear, I think. Extra small, it makes them a little bit smaller. We have the thickness, and we have rotation. So when you disable the rotation, they don't rotate. When you enable it, they rotate along with your fluids. And the type, which is the most wonderful one, you can choose between many different types. So the triangles are cool. You can just explore them by yourself, I guess, but there are some pretty neat ones there. I will disable the particles again, so making it a little bit more clear what the kaleidoscope is. It's basically turning your whole fluid simulation into a mandala, which looks really cool. I also really like mandalas and the symmetry they bring with it. So we have the kaleidoscope type. We have the mirror X, which is just mirroring the fluids on the X-axis. We have mirror Y and we have mirror XY, which is mirroring it on the X and the Y axis. So we have 4 times the same piece from the simulation. And it just feels awesome when you put 1 or 2 fingers on the screen and swiping around. So definitely something you have to try on your own. I will disable it for now again. We have the flare option. It's just a little post-processing effect which will make the edges it's just making a flare on top of the fluids. You can adjust the intensity. Texture is also nice. It's overlaying a texture. You can choose between different ones and you can also configure the intensity for sure. We have motion, which sometimes can give pretty interesting effects. You can see what it does when we decrease the motion a little bit and enable the blur. You can see that it's just having kind of a motion blur effect, and when you really increase it, it sometimes gives crazy effects on the fluids. So make sure to don't miss that and play around with the values. We have neon. It's highlighting the edges of the fluids. And we also have the glitch section. There are many different glitches to choose from, and the best thing is you can put them on top of each other. So let's say I have the glitch 1 and I also want to have a little bit of the glitch 5 effect. So I can just stack them on top of each other and making my complete own glitch experience. Just give it a try. Leaving the glitches behind for now. Chromatic aberrations, very straightforward. Chromatic aberration effect. Emboss effect, also very clear. The inverted one is cool. I don't use it too often, but I think it really gives a nice and interesting touch to the whole simulation, because it's just inverting the colors. Gives interesting effects. And we have the lightning, which adds some other lightning to the fluids. You can see that it's looking more like 3-dimensional right now. Intensity parameter, use it as you want. And that's for the effects. So many different effects to combine with each other. Awesome things you can do there. And now let's come to the fluid settings, so the fluid behavior. You can define the complexity for the fluid simulation. The more complex it goes, the more fine the fluids are looking. Then we have invert direction, straightforward, just inverting the direction in which the fluids come out of your fingertip. Then we have walls. That's also pretty clear. Whenever you go, I have connected right now configured. Whenever you push something to the borders of the fluid simulation, it's just coming out of the on the other side again. The warp one is something you just need to experience yourself. It changes a little bit how the fluids come out of your finger and how they distribute over the whole screen. You can also define the intensity for the warp, the size, pretty easy one. Vorticity, that's something which brings more chaos into the simulation. The higher the vorticity goes, the more chaos you have. And when we go for very low vorticity, you can see that it looks pretty structured and very, very clear. Speed, low speed, it's just looking like we nearly frozen the time. Pretty cool. You can just play around with it and toggle between 0 and 1. Nice. Splat force, the force which you apply when you push your finger and bring some fluids into the simulation. Force dissipation, movement dissipation, that are two things you just need to experience by yourself. It changes a little bit how the fluids react when you give them into the simulation. And the durability, which is just how long the fluids stay in the simulation. You see, I have a really low durability right now. The fluids are disappearing quite fast. When I go for very high durability, you can see that the fluids remain in the simulation way longer. And that's it. And we have the flow, which is awesome. I just added that in the newest update. And this is so powerful. It's another particle module, but it's on the whole screen. You're seeing particles on the whole screen. And whenever you touch on your screen, the flow of the particles is influenced. So wonderful. So many different parameters to configure over here. So you have the opacity of the flow, the opacity of the particles, because we wanted to concentrate on the particles right now. I will put that to 1, and the fluid opacity, I will set that to 0 because fluids doesn't matter at the moment. You have the circular force. Wow, it's just looking like a new universe popping up on the screen. Crazy. So this one, then you have the air resistance, something you just need to experience by yourself. You have different forces you can apply, the force at the different axes. You see when I increase that to a very high value, all the particles are going to the right, going to the top. And this one is cool. Now in the Z axis, it's going all away from me, and when I put it to minus, to a negative value, all the particles are coming into my direction. Looks like they're coming out of the screen. Just go to 0 here. Okay, then you have the turbulence, which is defining how much chaos you want to have inside the simulation. Going for very high values will make sure that the particles are wiggling a little bit and looking a little bit more chaotic. We have the emission value. The higher the emission value is, the more particles will appear over time. The size of the particles, the speed. Just go again for freezing the time. Ooh, nice. That looks awesome. So many slow particles, slow-mo. And the lifetime, which is just defining how long the particles live. So when you go for very low lifetime, less particles will be visible on the screen because they die earlier. And when you go for very high lifetime value, then more particles staying on the screen for a longer time. Here you have the color to define. And I think when you just combine that in a certain way with the fluids, the flow module in combination with the fluids, it can give beautiful effects. Now that's really up to you what you make out of it and how you combine these different effects. That's it for the flow module. Awesome one, beautiful effects. We have the color, which defines the color of the fluids, also pretty important. Random color, whenever you touch on the screen, the random color is generated. We have the gradient, where you can choose a certain gradient and it just go through this gradient. We have the simple color. You have two parameters to play around with, the color value and the color range, which is making a little gradient out of it. You can see it right now. The color is changing over time. We have the double, which is same like the simple one, but with two colors. So whenever you put a second finger onto the simulation, it's having another color. Two colors, the same but not with gradients, but with static colors. RGB. And the cosine. That makes awesome effects sometimes. Just play around with the values. And I also recognize that the fluids are a little bit too small for me right now. I will just increase the size a little bit. I will go for a little bit more complex and enable the bloom, because bloom is one of my favorite effects. Increasing the intensity a little bit. Going down with the threshold. That looks pretty neat. We have even more colors. Random time, position-based gradient, a gradient where it depends where you touch your finger on the screen, at which position. And that's it for the colors. We also have a text feature included. Straightforward, just type your text and it will appear in the simulation. And it will also be integrated in the simulation in nice ways. For example, we have prepared this one preset where this is called Hey. And this is beautiful because the particles are also sticking at the text, so you can just experience it yourself. Beautiful one. Just going back here, loading another one into it. Let's say I want the veins. That's cool. Okay, so we have the text. We also have autopilot, which I had enabled. So whenever you wanted to have autopilot touches on the screen, you can enable it, and you can define how many fingers should be automatically put into the simulation. You can also disable it. We have certain device settings for force touch and haptic feedback, which are not available on every platform. We have the random option. That's also pretty nice when you just wanted to explore some random configurations. You can define which effects you wanted to apply randomly. So for me, it should be, I don't know exactly, but I want, because I like the flow so much, I want some random flow. And a little bit of kaleidoscope and some flare, and that's it. And whenever I click on the random button, there's a random effect generated. Ooh, that's nice. Ooh, that's also nice. Beautiful ones. Just experiment with it. So it's basically your gate into a world of endless possibilities for the fluid simulation. Crazy. I never saw that before. Insane. We have also a random button. When you enable the toggle, a random button will appear, and you can put the random option on autopilot. When you click on the play option, you can see that we have a repetition time you can configure, and whenever we hit the 13.55 seconds, a new random visual is generated. It goes like that the whole time. We can stop the randomizer once again, hide the button, and here we have the backgrounds. When you are a little bit bored by the black background, you can have your image loaded into the simulation and even integrated into the simulation. I will just disable the kaleidoscope once again to make it a little bit more clear what I'm talking about. But you can see that we have a default image loaded here, but you can also load your own images. And it's reactive. I just enabled this toggle over here, the reactive one. And that means that the image, the background image, is flowing into your simulation as well, which is just beautiful. Okay, we have some more background options. Some like to have a clock in the background. Some like to have a static color. Rather than having the black one, we can also have whatever other color you like. But I will go for the static black, which is my favorite. So you can see the fluids in a more intense way. We have NDI output, and we have a more in general section where you can define settings. You can define a language. You can change the language of the texts. You can define UI sound and tab menu. Tab menu is something really cool because when you enable it, the menu button will stay hidden until you double tap on the screen. The default one is when you don't do anything, the menu button just appears, but some prefer to have it when you double tap on the simulation. We have links for tutorial and for some other important things over here. And the last feature I want to talk about here is the recording feature. So we added a software to record your screen. When you click on the record button, then you see that there's the record button appearing, and when you click on it, the recording starts recording the whole screen but not the user interface. And when you click stop, it will be saved into your image gallery. You can define the quality and the device aspect or the aspect ratio for the recording over here. That's it for this section. Now I want to talk a little bit about the sounds. We have options to play a beautiful ambient track, which will bring you down a little bit, and it's very calming and relaxing. And we also have a visualizer feature, which is a pretty simple one, but basically you can load your custom files into the simulation or use a microphone input to visualize your sounds and make the fluid react to it. So you can just experiment with all the different parameters over here, and I'm sure you will find nice effects. Also, I want to say it's the easiest way to get started by just trying out all the things on your own, and hope you will enjoy the fluid simulation as much as I do.